was when I was first turning around. It was blown off and sent back through the engine. Our first stage compressor section, the first stage blade had no blades on it. 72 blades were knocked off and went back through the engine. That was on the right side. On the left side, it was a little better, actually. The engine was running, but the birds managed to knock they have a bunch of burner cans. They have 18 burner cans, and they managed to knock the fuel nozzles out of 2/3 of them. So they were injecting fuel directly into the exhaust, where it was igniting, which is why there was a 50-foot plume of fire coming out the back of that engine. Now, we've got the airplane in a glide now. We're just over 200 knots of airspeed, about 230 miles an hour. We're losing 1,000 feet a minute, but we're only at 3,000 feet to start with. The right engine is turning at very low sub-idle speed. The left one's better. It's idling, but it's not producing any power. But it is giving us a generator and a hydraulic pump, which is very critical for us, because all the engine or all the controls that fly the airplane are hydraulic. The flock of birds was so big that it painted on the air traffic control radar. You know, as you might imagine, they bias out birds, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see the airplanes. But we had the opportunity to see the radar plot about 4 months later when we had to go listen to our own cockpit force recorder tapes at the National Transportation Safety Board. And it was just a huge blotch of purple, little purple spots on the radar, because it was so big that it was actually making the radar turn. Now, I always thought that there were geese, just by how they were all flying in line. You usually don't see other kind of birds that high. But they sent the remains that they managed to get out of the engine off to the Smithsonian Institute, where they were positively identified as Canada geese. And I'm careful to say that because I was doing a safety seminar about a year and a half ago and had a couple of Air Canada pilots in the group. And afterwards they came up and they told me, they said, we have one bone to pick with you. They said, they're not, we call them Canadian geese. They're not Canadian geese, they're Canada geese. When you say Canadian, it makes it sound like we would. Now back in the cabin, the flight attendants know something's wrong, obviously. It's so quiet that they're whispering to each other on their jump seat. Sheila, our sea flight attendant, said it was like a live bird. But she's visible to the passenger. She's the only flight attendant that's actually visible to the passenger where she sits in an Airbus. And they're actually trained to know that the first thing you're going to do when you think there's something wrong is look around for a crew member to see what they look like. So if they're panicking, that's going to be bad. So they're actually trained to appear as calm as possible on the outside, even though inside they're just filled with turmoil because they have no idea what's going on in this situation. The passengers know that something's not horribly wrong. You know, they've heard and in some cases seen birds impacting the airplane. There's flames shooting out the left engine on the left side as its compressor stalling. But most of them thought that we've lost that engine, but we'll probably be returning to land on the one on the right side, which is the one that was actually dead, but they didn't know that. Up in the cockpit, I reached for my, what we call a quick reference handbook. It's an easy to access book of emergency procedures. That's over 100 pages long. And I have to find the exact page in here and start doing the 3-page checklist that's designed to be done at 30,000 feet. We didn't have, nobody ever envisioned we'd have a dual engine failure so low to the ground because it was assumed it would be at altitude with fuel starvation or flying through volcanic ash or what would cause this kind of thing. Nobody thought to make an abbreviated checklist for down low as we would. Still though, with all the panic, the shock, grabbing this, trying to find the right page, I was reading the checklist within 20 seconds of hitting the birds, which I didn't think was a big deal, but apparently it's some sort of record. About 9 months later, I had the opportunity to go over to Toulouse, France and fly the Airbus A380, which is the largest airplane in the world. And the Airbus test pilots were wanting to know everything there was about this situation, because of course it was their airplane, so they certainly simulated it many, many times in their simulator. And the one thing that one guy said to me is, he says, every time we did this, we could never get as start as fast or get as far as you did through this complex checklist on that day. And he seemed to be surprised about this, and I just looked at him and said, well, I have a reason to be motivated. Now Sully's calling Mayday, 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 declaring an emergency. That's how we do it. Our air traffic controller turned us to a heading of 220 degrees, which is a standard heading that they automatically turn anybody to who has an emergency off of LaGuardia. But the important thing for us is it lined us right up with the Hudson River traveling south. And I think we both saw it and knew that that was at least something that we could use. But our motivation is to try to get an engine restarted and get back to an airport. We don't think we're going to be landing in this way. Now I'm resetting computers to get our speed information back so that we can know how fast we're going, making sure we have electrics and hydraulics and trying to restart these engines that are